what my secret is. I just smile and say, follow me. I'm sitting on top of the world, on top of the world. Life's too short not to really live. I got a big heart, I can let you in. I'm sitting on top of the world, on top of the world.
Hi, and welcome back to Toxic Bliss, Surviving Narcissism with me, Awen Reese. In the last episode, we saw a couple of full-on narcissistic meltdowns, and we also saw the resulting punishment, gaslighting, and continued brainwashing that ensued. Looking back on it now, after years of healing, counseling, and intense study of this and other personality disorders, it's so obvious what was happening to me, and I find myself saying things like, "How could you not see that? That's so wrong. Why didn't you run?" I have to keep reminding myself that I was the target of a highly skilled manipulator, and I'm not actually that stupid. Well, at least not anymore. I guess what I'm doing is asking for your understanding as we go forward. Before we continue on, let me make the very important disclaimer. I am not a psychologist, psychiatrist, or mental health professional. If you need help or if you're in a dangerous situation, please reach out. I urge you to call the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Their advocates are available 24/7 at 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233. All calls are free and confidential. You can also reach them online at www.thehotline.org. I wanted to look back on one aspect of the previous episode before we begin today. It was the moment that I faced the decision to choose which reality I wanted to pursue. One fun fact about narcissists is that they have an uncanny ability to choose what to believe for themselves. At any given moment in their lives, they're creating a character and writing a script of their own backstory. They weave this tale with such deftness that they seem to fully believe their own tales. That's true and not true at the same time. A narcissist who rewrites their script is fully aware that it isn't the truth, but they make a very conscious decision to live as if it is the truth. They reinforce this lie every chance they get by retelling the story to anyone who will listen, and eventually, at least consciously, it replaces the previous version so completely that it appears utterly convincing to others and to themselves. When situations arise, such as the one that I was faced with, the narcissist transfers this ability to their targets. The positive reinforcement that the target receives for choosing the right timeline to embrace, it teaches them how to accomplish this feat. When I chose the timeline that virtually erased that horrible argument, it was immediately forgiven and forgotten. The target becomes an active participant in the narcissist's screenplay adaptations of their lives. This state of covert acceptance creates a bond of mutual self-destruction. If the target chooses to revisit the alternative timeline, the narcissist will fully use that against them, and on some level the target understands this and willingly goes along with the deception. It's one of the more insidious, unseen perils of narcissistic abuse, and we'll see more instances of this as the tale moves forward. But let's jump into it now, as I'm sure we all want to see what happens next. Will Mike come for a visit, or will things go horribly, terribly wrong? Anyone want to lay any bets? Mike would be here on Saturday. I felt like a caged animal waiting out the last few days. I couldn't contain myself. I wanted to scream from the rooftops and dance wildly in the street or something. Everything was ready for his arrival, and I only had to endure 48 more hours. I would make it, somehow. It was Thursday morning, and I had been pacing around the house waiting for him to call. I couldn't sit still, I couldn't eat, I couldn't think of anything else. Finally, the phone rang, and I heard the glorious sound of his voice. He was finishing up packing some clothes, and he had gotten an oil change for the car, and we had mapped out the entire trip so he wouldn't get lost. I was having random bursts of tears over the last few days, but not out of sadness, just abject frustration and joy combined. This has been the longest week of my life, and time was crawling so painfully slow. We spent almost the entire day on the phone together, like-minded in our deliciously painful anticipation. I can't think of anything that I had been more excited for, and this man had become my entire consciousness. Every single thing I did was done with him on my mind. I would wake up in the morning and be sad that he wasn't beside me in bed, even though we hadn't even met yet. I would shower and pick out an outfit that I knew he'd love, even though he'd never seen any of my clothes. I'd make breakfast and fight back the urge to set an extra place at the table. If I wasn't talking to him on the phone, I was having a constantly running conversation with him in my head, all day, every day. I was completely intoxicated. We ended our conversation on Thursday night with great reluctance, but he needed to get a good night's rest. He had a 24-hour drive ahead of him, and I didn't want him tired or distracted on the road. He said he'd call me in the morning before he left, and he'd be scooping me into his arms before I knew it. I could barely breathe, just imagining what that was going to feel like. I crawled into bed, though I'm not sure why. There wasn't a chance at all that I was going to sleep that night, but at least I could close my eyes and daydream the hours away. By 6 a.m., I was out of bed and pacing around again, desperate for the phone to ring so I would know that he was on the way to me, and I could begin my vigil by staring out the window and waiting to see him magically appear. By 8 a.m., I was already tired of pacing, and I flopped down on the couch and tried to watch some TV. Wasn't he ready to leave yet? Time was wasting away. Let's get on with this, buddy. I laughed to myself, and that running conversation in my head had taken a playful turn. The phone rang and startled me out of a light sleep. I didn't realize I had drifted off. I answered quickly as the phone was still clutched tightly in my hand, and it was not him. I found this entirely irritating, and I quickly ended the call. I didn't want to be on the phone if he was trying to reach me. Yes, I had call waiting then, but still, what if it didn't work, or what if I missed his call somehow? It's just unacceptable. I stood up and I looked at the time. 1 p.m.? Really? I had slept that long? And he hadn't called yet. What was going on? Maybe he just forgot to call in his rush to get here. Hopefully he'd stop for a rest somewhere and call me from the road if he could find a phone. I let myself indulge in a small fantasy. Maybe he had left last night after our call, so he'd be here much earlier than expected to surprise me. If that was the case, he could even be here tonight. Oh, I really hope he had done that. That would be amazing. And it would be just like him to do that. He liked to try to be unpredictable, and he loved surprising people. And, I'd pretty much convinced myself that that's exactly what happened, and I only had a few more hours to wait until he arrived. I took a long bubble bath in the middle of the day. Such decadence. And I put my favorite scent in all the right places. I chose a casual but come-hither outfit, and spent a very long time making sure every strand of hair on my head was perfectly in place. And that was no easy feat back then with my lion's mane of unruly ginger curls. But it kept me busy for about an hour. I considered preparing something for dinner for when he arrived, but I was just too dolled up to risk messing it up by going into the kitchen and cooking. We'd just order out, and after all, I did have to make it look like I'd be surprised when he turned up, because if not, I'd spoil his fun. My daughter was spending the weekend with her grandmother, so I didn't have anything to occupy my mind except waiting. It never ceases to amaze me how slowly time moves when you're cognizant of every second, every half-second, even every plonk second. A few hours was literally an eternity. I started to get really antsy around 7 that night. I still hadn't heard from him, and exhaustion was starting to set in. I hadn't eaten for at least the last day and a half. I hadn't slept for several nights, aside from that impromptu nap I had earlier that day. I laid down on the sofa and arranged myself just so that I wouldn't mess up my outfit, my hair, or get any strange pillow creases on my face. I fell asleep almost immediately, and I slept hard and long. By the time I woke, it was Saturday late morning. I jumped up, confused and scared that I had slept through something important. There were no messages on the answering machine. There was no one knocking at the door. What was going on? Where was he? Even if he hadn't left early, he still should have been here by now. I booted up my computer to check my emails. Perhaps he had left a message there somehow, but there was nothing. Well, this wasn't good. But he could be arriving any minute, so I had to freshen up fast. by 8 o'clock Saturday night, I had to finally admit to myself that something had gone wrong. Of course my mind jumped to the worst-case scenario. He was dead. He must have had an accident on the way here and died in a bloody wreck on some unknown stretch of highway somewhere on the East Coast. How on earth would I find out about it? My heart caught in my throat at the thought of such an outcome. I did go online and check the news in every state that he would have been driving through, but I didn't see any reports of horrific interstate accidents. So that was reassuring, at least, but not entirely. I took up residence in the chair by the window and stared out into the night. He could still be here any minute. Maybe he just drove slowly or got tired. Maybe he had to stop for the night, so he was behind a few hours. It was also February, so he could have hit a snowstorm and decided to pull over and wait it out. All right, well, 12 hours late, but still, he could just be behind, that's all. I don't know what time it was when I had fallen asleep again, but the next time I woke, it was Sunday, early morning. The phone was ringing, and I lunged for it from across the room. "Hello?" I answered with a panicked tone. It was my mother calling to see what time she should drop Maggie off later that day. "Oh, hi, Mom," I said with obvious disappointment. She asked what was wrong, and wasn't my visit with my friend going well? I told her that he hadn't arrived yet, and I was worried that something had happened to him on the way. She was very calming and reassuring, but I also thought that she was secretly pleased. The idea of a stranger from the interwebs coming to meet her daughter was beyond appalling in her mind. He could be a serial killer, and the irony of that has never left me. I told her to bring Maggie home whenever she was ready. I missed her terribly, and I really needed to have her with me now. A return to normal routine would help the time pass, and surely I'd hear something soon. But a week went by without any word. I had sent a few emails, and I had called a few times with no answer on the other end. I had to admit that it seemed as though this has been a very, very cruel joke. Maybe this was even punishment for that argument that technically no longer existed. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, more unanswered emails and phone calls. 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 2 months. I had made one phone call that had actually been answered. A young girl picked up the phone, and I realized it must be his daughter. I asked her if her dad was home. She didn't respond to me, but she had yelled to her mother, "Mom, someone's looking for Daddy." His ex-wife took the phone and said hello. I hung up. I didn't have the guts to ask her where he was. I had resigned myself to the fact that he was indeed gone. Not dead, perhaps. I had checked the Florida obituaries many times, but he was gone from me and from my world. Things had returned to some form of normal, though I still carried myself as if I had suffered a devastating loss. I couldn't quite shake it, even 2.5 months later. My world just felt darker and clouded. I didn't expect to ever hear from him again, and the loss had taken a far greater toll on me than I would have thought possible. Every so often, I would have moments where I missed him so intensely that I would break down and write him a long email. His email address was still active, though I hadn't seen him log in, and none of the emails had been answered, or even read. But I would write to him anyway. I would write about my day, my thoughts, how much I missed him and thought about him constantly. And some of these emails were angry, when I would think he just did this to hurt me. But I didn't write these with the assumption that he'd ever read them. It was simply a way for me to rid myself of the painful, bothersome thoughts that wouldn't leave me alone. It was like writing a letter to someone you loved who had passed away and throwing it into the wind. It was a short-term Band-Aid, if nothing else. By the 3rd month, I had stopped writing those emails. I was functioning normally, and life was all right. I do recall that I had no future-forward thinking during this time, though. I wasn't making goals or working toward anything. I was simply existing, and I wasn't too bothered by that. It was just okay. I was online one night, chatting with a friend that I had made from the Czech Republic. He had been part of our study group chat room, and we had become pretty close internet friends. He knew all about the mic drama, and he had supported me and kept me smiling and distracted enough as I went through the worst of things. All of a sudden, he typed several lines of OMG, OMG, OMG in all caps. What was wrong? What happened? Are you okay? I typed back as fast as I could. Are you sitting down? He asked. Make sure you're sitting down. Well, I'm at my desk, so of course I'm sitting down. What happened? Are you okay? And he replied, he just logged on to an old screen name. He messaged me. He wants to know where you are. I had made a new suite of screen names for myself because I wanted to move away from the name that had become so closely associated with him. Who he? I asked. Who's looking for me? Dang, I was slow back then. Mike, he told me. A rush of what felt like every chemical that the human body is capable of creating coursed through me in an instant. My eyes widened, I stopped breathing, I stopped blinking. Everything stopped. Are you there? Are you okay? He asked me several times. I'm here, was all I managed to send back. Do you want me to give him your new screen name, or can I tell him to F off? Chuck was a good friend of mine, and he would have loved the opportunity to tell Mike to F off. I don't know, I said. I honestly don't know. I felt as though I was standing at the event horizon of a supermassive black hole. I knew that if I talked to him, I would fall in and be lost forever. But I also knew that I was already caught in this gravitational pull, and I'd never be free of it if I didn't talk to him. Okay, tell him, I typed, knowing on some deep primal level that I had just sealed my fate. Within a few seconds, an IM popped up from Mike on a screen name that I had never seen before. I only have a minute. I'm on a friend's computer. Can I call you? Sure. I typed in the number in case he had forgotten it. Okay, call you in a minute. And that was it. He logged off. I ran to grab the phone and then ran straight into the bathroom and threw up. My body was confirming what my subconscious mind was shouting at me. This is not a good idea. But when was I ever known for following through on good ideas anyway? Psh, this is fine. Thankfully, his call was delayed long enough for me to brush my teeth and change my shirt. The phone rang and I answered it instantly. Collect call from Mike. Will you accept the charges? Collect? Really? Of course it's collect, because of course it is. My inner voice rolled her eyes, but I told her to just shut up. Yes, I told the recorded voice. The call connected. Hi, he said, as cheerfully as a cheerful thing with cheerful written all over it. Hi, I tried to say. I guess I have some explaining to do, don't I? He said with a soft chuckle at the end. Well, yes, please, was all I said. But my brain was running 10 times the speed of sound, and had already processed 1,000 thoughts, including, oh, this is funny to you? Really, pal? Yeah, let's hear this explanation. This should be good. And even to the other extreme of, oh my God, it's really him. He's not dead. Oh my God, I love him so much. Oh, please let this be real. He explained that he couldn't call me or email me or anything for all this time. He had no access to the internet, and he couldn't remember my phone number off the top of his head, or he would have called from where he was. He couldn't even get a message to anyone to have them contact me on his behalf. Well, where were you all this time? I asked him softly, with no specific tone of voice. Are you sitting down? He chuckled again. Now, this was the second time tonight someone had asked me that. This had to be some kind of sign. Where were you? I repeated. Well, you won't like it, and there's a long story that I have to tell you about it, but don't worry, everything's fine. It'll all work out, and everything's really settled now. It was just a misunderstanding, that's all. Where were you? I repeated again, this time with a definitely pronounced tone of voice. Okay, well, don't react straight away, okay? Let me explain. All right, I confirmed. He then proceeded to tell me that he had been in jail, of all places. When he was getting ready to leave on that Friday morning all those months ago, his ex-wife had cornered him into an argument. She didn't want him to go. Well, I asked him why she didn't want him to go. After all, they weren't married, and they were just roommates, so why would she care if he went on a trip or not? He explained that she had wanted to go away with her boyfriend, but if he left, then she'd have to cancel and stay home to care for their daughter. He said they fought about it because he had made these plans long before she did, and he was going, and that was final. He told me how she had stood in the doorway of the room that they were in and blocked his exit. He just brushed past her, didn't even push her or anything, and she followed him down the stairs, yelling and screaming at him. She had a tendency to get hysterical about things, you know. He ignored her and went into the kitchen to get a drink, and she was so mad that she called the police and said that he had attacked her. They came and arrested him on the spot, and he got 90 days in jail. I listened silently as a wave of nausea spread through me, and he continued. He had wanted to use his one magic phone call at the jail on me to let me know what had happened, but he just couldn't remember the number, and they wouldn't let him write an email. He didn't have any way to get in touch with a bail bondsman or reach anyone, so he just sat there in his cell counting down the days till his release. I remained silent, but oh, did I have questions. But now that the bomb had been dropped and I hadn't hung up the phone on him, he decided that it was safe to continue. I thought about you non-stop. Every night I would try to reach out to you with my mind, and I hoped that you could feel me, feel the love that I was sending you. I was so scared you'd forget about me while I was in there. I was afraid you'd meet someone else and move on. You haven't, though, right? Please say you haven't. The thought of you was the only thing that kept me going when I wanted to give up. I thought about giving up so many times, but I would just think of you, and then I'd want to live and get out of here and start our life together. I love you so much. You still want me, don't you? I let out a deep sigh and told him that I honestly didn't know what I thought right now. I needed some time to think about it. But he wasn't really in a charitable mood, and he didn't feel like giving me any time to think about anything. His rambling continued. I bet you were mad at me when I didn't show up. Oh, what did you think? Were you worried that I had disappeared or got hurt or something? That must have been so hard for you. You are so strong. You're the strongest person I know. That's why I love you so much. I knew I would make it because I had you with me in my heart. You're still with me, aren't you? Oh, I just wanted him to be quiet for a minute so I could think. He would not stop talking. Listen, I need to go and think about this for a while, okay? Where can I reach you? Can you get emails now? And he replied, well, maybe. Depends if Tina will let me back in the house. I'm heading there after this call to see if I can at least get some clothes and find somewhere to stay. She might not let me. I could be homeless, you know. I just don't even know yet. But if I can stay there, I'll get online and look for you, okay? I haven't even called her yet. You were the first call I made because you're the one that matters to me. I love you. Well, call me tomorrow or email or something. Use the computer at the library if you have to, but please don't call me collect. I really can't afford that crap. Oh, but, he completely dismissed that concern. Oh, it's just money, but I won't call collect if I don't absolutely have to, okay? Try to be online. I can probably convince Tina to let me stay there for a little while until I figure out where to go. I'll try to get online tonight, but I'm going to go now. Love you. He finally finished, and I said a quick goodbye and hung up the phone before he could start talking again. But how does one begin to process something like this? Here he was, virtually back from the dead, which was good, great even. He still loved me, that was good news. But he had had a fight with his ex-wife that ended up with him getting arrested. That was definitely not good news. I also felt like he was guilt-tripping me through that whole conversation. But it was him, and he was back. And he was mine if I wanted him. But did I still want him? Well, of course I did, but did I want this him, the version of him that could have a fight with his ex-wife and end up in jail? I believed his story about what happened during the fight, but that's still bad. I had never known anyone that had gone to jail, and that was a whole different world that I didn't want any part of. Oh dear, this was one heck of a mess. And that brings us to the end of this chapter. Tune into the next episode to see if I take him back, because I'm sure you'll be surprised by my decision. Anyway, thank you for listening, and take care.
People ask me what my secret